Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey from the very beginning. And that's pretty big beginning. So it's way back. So big thank you to Folgers. We love you. We appreciate you. And it just would not be the same without you. So thank you. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, the sonic surgeon, for his contribution of his time, his voice, and his music for our intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on any of your favorite platforms. So big thank you to him. Also big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind our banners and logos. So big thank you to him. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. He just happens to be, I guess his area of specialty happens to be the horror genre, of course. Anyway, it is that time again. You're going to start seeing some promo coming up. With respects to the Outer Realm and, of course, our nomination for a third year for the People's Choice Podcast Awards and the category of Best Female Hosts. We're always so honored to be recommended, and we thank you. So heads up, you'll start seeing a lot of different promo coming on board, probably starting in the next week. So tonight we welcome, for the I guess not for the first time, isn't it? It's for the return of Robert W. Sullivan IV. And the topic of discussion is going to be the Royal Arch of Enoch, which is his book, The Impact of Masonic Rituals, Philosophy, and Symbolism. And I know we've had a lot of good feedback coming in already for people who is really looking forward to this specific segment. So our guest is waiting in the green room. Amelia, how are you?
I'm okay. Sorry if I freeze. I don't know what's wrong with my internet. How are you?
Okay. Well, I'm okay.
Yeah, there's nothing I can do. The tower behind me is all lit up. It doesn't show anything. So I think it's just my browser and StreamYard.
Oh, well, it won't be the first time StreamYard is having hiccups, shall we say. So we're going to bring on our guest, and people are already starting to chime in. Hey, Ruth, Adriana, Chris, hello. All righty, let's get the show on the road. I myself have been looking really forward to this. So this is my area of fun. Hello. Very nice. Hi. How are you? How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Michelle and Amelia. Thank you for having me back on the Outer Realm. It's my pleasure to be here this evening.
Oh, it's an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor. Really been looking forward to this. And it seems like a lot of people have been interested in this topic. And I'm just going to let you take it. But first, I want to go in because I thought I had this up someplace. Here it is. Okay, so just so everybody knows what it is we are covering tonight, this is, okay, one second. There we go. So this is Robert's book, and this can be found on Amazon, Robert, or your website?
Yeah, Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million. It's in the print form and the Kindle ebook. Both versions are readily available.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I don't even know where you want to start, but the stage is yours, and you just take it where you want. We will keep up, and
Sure.
Take it away.
All right. The Royal Arch of Enoch was my first book. It was originally published back in 2012, and then there was a second edition of it that came out in 2016. There's actually a third edition of it on the way, but that's
Wow.
probably another two years away, probably 2 or 3 years away. I've already started it, but there will be a third edition out in the next 2 or 3 years to get it really up to where I wanted it to be. And this again was my first book, and I am a Freemason, and I've been in the Blue Lodge now and the Scottish Rite going on, over 26 years for the Blue Lodge, so going on 30
Wow.
years for this thing. Yeah, it started for me in the 1996, 97, and the book, the Royal Arch of Enoch book, is really a lot of Masonic history. I get into a lot of the ritual symbolism, what it means, and the heart and soul of the book is to present this historical anomaly, and that is that this particular high degree ritual. The Royal Arch of Enoch is a ritual. That's the title of an actual Masonic ritual, a ceremonial. It's part of the high degrees. It exists in the Scottish Rite and the York Rite. And it's arguably the most important degree in the high degree systems. It's much more important than the 33rd of the Scottish Rite. That's for certain. It's really the heart and soul of the high degrees. And the anomaly that I presented was that when this ritual was being generated, was being crafted in France in the 1740s, 1750s, was incorporating components of the lost Book of Enoch, one Enoch, the Ethiopian Enoch, which shouldn't be happening because technically, according to mainstream history, one Enoch is off the pages of Western history at that point in time. It goes missing. It goes missing from around the 2nd, 3rd century up until, I believe, 1787, when a man named James Bruce returns from Egypt with a couple copies. But yet this ceremonial was, sort of incorporating certain components of it. And it's really an incredibly important ritual because it's sort of the end of the Masonic journey. It's really a continuation on of what happens in the Blue Lodge, and to understand its importance, which we can talk about. You have to understand what's going on in the Blue Lodge ritual, then what's happening in the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. And the other thing that's very critical to all this is it's really the ritual. We talk about the United States being this Masonic republic, this, that, and the other. It's really the degree that's sort of all the philosophy and the symbolism that's being used. A lot of it, not all of it, that's being used to formulate the United States. So that was really the thrust of the book. And like I said, it was originally published over 10 years ago. There will be a third edition of it coming out. That will be the final edition also.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I get into theories of, where this lost Book of Enoch could have come from, or at least, an outline of it or pieces of it. I mean, there are certain people out there in the historical spectrum that could have had access to it. I get into that, and then I get into a lot of the philosophy underlying the symbolism in the Blue Lodge and the high degrees. So it's a very, I'm very proud of it. Like I said, it was my first book. And then, of course, I ended it, like I'd have to. The final chapter does deal with Masonic and Enochic symbolism in movies, of course. That was the final chapter. So, yeah, that was it.
Well, part of my ignorance, but are you able to talk about this stuff? Because you hear the stories, like, like the secret societies, even though the Freemasons are very well known. I have many Masonic friends also, but they're the first to tell you, like, oh, we can't talk about that. I'm like, how long have you been in the Freemasons? Are you sure you're not allowed to talk about it? So are you allowed to?
Oh, sure.
You can,
Sure.
really?
Yeah. You're allowed to talk about any of the history, the philosophy, the symbolism.
Okay.
That's all fair game. There are numerous Masonic authors who are completely mainstream, who are Freemasons, who said that's all part of the public record now. You can talk about it.
Excellent.
The one thing that they do frown upon still, and I don't do this, is they don't want you disclosing the passwords or the tokens or the signs. What are called the signs of identification that they still don't want you talking about. So inevitably, what I do in the book is I just usually write down the initials, or like an initial and then 2 dash marks. That's the only thing they really do frown upon. But I mean, as far as talking about the history and the symbolism and the ritual, no, that's no problem.
Can
Yeah, of course.
You can see me and you can hear me. I'm having a lot of trouble with internet.
Sorry,
although
yes.
please forgive me. Yeah. I was just going to ask you because Michelle opened it, so now I'm gonna slide my question in. Do they have to preview your book before you're allowed to publish it?
No, my book was not. I did not have it previewed or anything like that. I wrote it completely independently. I think after it was published, um, most Freemasons who read it liked it. There
Good.
was some backlash against it, but I expected that. But no, I did not. I did not, submit it for any sort of approval or anything like that. I've read the Masonic literature on all this, and essentially, like I said, it's the only thing they really don't want you disclosing are the passwords, the tokens, the hand grips,
Yes.
things like that. But like
Well,
I
I'm
said,
glad.
the ritual symbolism and stuff, the
Yeah.
history, that's all fair game.
Just curious because once you put it on, pen to paper, it's forever. Internet is forever. That's why I was curious because we hear so many things from misinformed, obviously. But thank you for answering that.
Yeah, I have been. I cannot tell you how many Masonic lodges I have been invited to give lectures. I did it at some point. Like one of the brothers in the lodge would read it, loved it, and wanted me to come and give a lecture. I did that. I kind of stopped doing it just because of time constraints. But with the internet, it's just so much easier to do shows like this. But I have given lectures at Masonic lodges. Like I said. It has been well received by most Masons, but not all of them. And when I published it, I knew that was going to be the case. There never will be universal approval or liking on anything, and but like I said, I knew that going into it.
Right.
Excellent.
So, may I ask why the Book of Enoch? What is so special about it? I mean, those of us who have read it understand, but there are a lot of people who have no idea. I mean, they read the Bible and they don't realize that this was part of the Old Testament and this was of great importance.
Right. It has to do with the dissemination of wisdom, and the ritual revolves around Enoch. It runs parallel with the pillars of Hermes, the pillars of Thoth, and the pillars
Right.
of Enoch. They are essentially the same thing, and it has to do with the restoration of antediluvian wisdom. Is what the whole Masonic story is all about,
Okay.
especially in the high degrees. And again, in order to kind of understand it, you have to delve into what the ritual is documenting. And you have to start in the Blue Lodge. In a nutshell, I'll try to encapsulate this as quickly as
Please.
I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, in the Blue Lodge, where this is coming from is that you get into the third degree, which again is a retelling of the Osirian mythology of what I would call the dying and resurrected solar god man, where the candidate portrays this architect named Hiram Abiff, who is the architect building Solomon's temple. And Hiram possesses something known as the word of a master mason or the word of a mason. And this word is the name of God. It's what's known as the tetragrammaton. And it's through the correct pronunciation of this word that all wisdom is possible. So at any rate, he has this word, and three fellowcraft want the word, and they threaten to kill him if they don't give it if he doesn't tell them what it is. So as the temple is nearing completion, he's leaving, and he's accosted one at a time by these three fellowcraft who demand to get this word, this name of God, and he refuses it. And he says, once the temple's built and it's finished, which we're not too far off on, I promise I will tell you, but not until then. That's not good enough, so they kill him. And at the end of the day, he is resurrected by what is something known as the substitute word of a master mason. The word is lost. And you will constantly hear this when it comes to Freemasonry is the lost word of a master mason. The Masons are looking for the lost word. This is like the Grail quest or the Golden Fleece or something like that.
Right.
So the word is lost. No one knows what it is or where it is. And then when but if you get into the high degrees, then you fast forward to this Royal Arch Enoch ceremonial, the word is found, and the word is found in the subterranean vault beneath 9 archways, and it's resting in between the 2 pillars of Hermes or Thoth or Enoch, and upon these 2 pillars is, in the Masonic literature, is all wisdom, is antediluvian wisdom. And what do I mean by that? When Enoch goes into the heavens, on his little journey, he catches word that the Creator is going to destroy humankind, and he's going to destroy it with the flood of Noah. And of course, Enoch in the heavens or the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, of course, he gains all this wisdom from talking to the angels and this group of fallen angels known as the Watchers. So Enoch has this wisdom. So what he decides to do is he's going to trick God. He's going to pull a fast one. And what he does is he inscribes all this wisdom on the 2 pillars. And on one pillar is the mathematical information, and on the other pillar is the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And what he does is he takes these 2 pillars and he buries them in the subterranean vault. And in between them, he places on this golden delta the name of God. And it's through the correct pronunciation of this word on this delta that these 2 pillars can be restored to humankind. So, of course, the flood of Noah comes. God thinks he's gotten rid of all this. He's gotten rid of this wisdom, but he hasn't. It's been preserved. God doesn't know this. And in the Masonic lore, the Vault of Enoch, the subterranean chamber, is breached by 2 mythological characters before the Masons get there. The first is Pythagoras, the mathematician, who, of course, has his eureka moment, right? I have found,
right.
Referring to the name of God. And, of course, he pronounces it correctly and restores all the mathematical wisdom back to humankind. Then the other character is this guy known as Hermes Trismegistus, who goes into the vault, and he correctly pronounces the name of God and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences back to mankind. And if you're familiar with the Masonic literature, it's from those that Masonry originates. So Hermes Trismegistus is essentially the godfather of Freemasonry. So anyway, when you go into this high degree ceremonial, the subterranean vault is discovered. It's beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They're getting ready to build the second temple of Zorobabel, and they discover this subterranean vault hidden by Hiram Abiff, of all people. And he apparently could foresee his own death, so he took this word and buried it between the 2 pillars of Enoch. So this is where this whole thing with the Book of Enoch is coming into this, and the whole thing with this is in the Masonic lore, when the candidate gets hold of this word, and this was critical to the country, to the United States, and this is where this whole part of this Illuminati deep state thing comes from. It comes from the Royal Arch Masons. When the candidate gets this word and pronounces it, symbolically, the candidate is now God. The candidate is now like a godlike figure. That's probably the better word. He is Pythagoras. He is Enoch, and with that, he is given an express warrant to rule over the populace. So when you get into the early days of the country, all the high Masons who were pulling the strings had to achieve this high degree ceremonial known as the Royal Arch of Enoch. And it's through this high degree that this character named DeWitt Clinton was running the country from behind the scenes. And this was in the early days. This occurred pretty much after the death of Washington in 1799 up until the mid 1820s, when this whole cabal was exposed and essentially threatened to end Freemasonry in the United States.
Gosh, that's a lot to take in. It sounds a little bit to me, a little bit like the Templars on the Temple Mount. They were looking for secrets. They were looking for knowledge. I don't believe they were pilfering for gold. Aren't the Scottish Rites Masons like the only real descendants of the Knights Templar?
Well, no, this is a big misnomer you're talking about.
Okay.
The blue
Scottish Rites.
Well, let me explain a little bit.
Okay.
Because I got to back up a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
The blue, there's two types of Freemasonry. There's the Blue Lodge, which is degrees 1, 2, and 3, and then there's the high degrees. These
Okay.
come from different places.
Okay, perfect.
In England, Freemasonry proper, the Blue Lodge, this is degrees 1, 2, and 3. These officially come onto the scene of history in 1717.
Okay. Right.
These are the lodges that you've heard about, where these are the actual stonemasons who are building
Got
the
it.
cathedrals, and they start allowing in doctors and philosophers and lawyers to these meetings where they start talking about different things. And this was very big in Scotland. Scotland's really the place
Yes.
that it started. One of the guys
Okay.
who's the big reorganizer of all this, of organizing the lodges in Scotland, is a guy named William Shaw. And he's very critical to the formation of early Freemasonry, and it is in Scotland. This is what I am talking about right now, though, is just the Blue Lodge. This is
Okay.
the degrees 1, 2, and 3. This is
Okay.
1717. If in 1723, a Presbyterian minister named James Anderson writes something known as the Constitutions of the Freemasons. And in this constitution, he gives the bylaws. He gives, the ritual structure, and in this, he gives this very convoluted history of Freemasonry that is, of course, a mythology. Where, and you've heard this before, where he traces it back to the medieval builders. Then he goes back to the Egyptians with the pyramids, and he ultimately traces this back to Adam in the Garden of Eden, where he says when Adam was created, the first thing God taught him was the occult and Freemasonry, and that the fig leaf is his Masonic apron. Of course, no Freemason believes this. This is all just mythology.
Right.
So this is the history of Freemasons as it is put out by James Anderson in England.
Right.
In 1737, a Roman Catholic Jacobite Freemason, who was a co-founder of the Royal Society, comes along. His name is Andrew the Chevalier Ramsay. And he comes along and he issues this thing in 1737 called the Oration. It's called Ramsay's Oration. And he says in this, and this is what you're getting at, and this is where you have this decided split. And he says Freemasonry, he said, I don't disagree with Anderson that Freemasonry has to do with the cathedral building, and that it has some biblical overtones, and it has to do with this and that. He says, but Anderson's inherently wrong. He says Freemasonry is Roman Catholic. He said Freemasonry is the pure Roman Catholic religion. He said, and Freemasonry is a product of these Roman Catholic black magicians known as the Knights Templar. He said, and that's where Freemasonry comes from. He said in Freemasonry, when the Templars were over in the Middle East, they learned about Kabbalah, they learned about magic, they learned Middle Eastern Sufism. He said, and they brought all this back, and Freemasonry is the inheritant of this Knights Templar, coterie of sorcery, banking, all that stuff. And it is from this oration that the high degrees are born. And this is where you're really getting into some deep waters conspiracy with the Masons. The Scottish Rite and the York Rite, the high degrees, are created as part of the Counter-Reformation by the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, in the 1740s, 1750s in Paris, France. And the ultimate purpose of the high degrees is to infiltrate Freemasonry and make it Roman Catholic. And the Scottish Rite and the York Rite have nothing to do with Scotland. They have nothing to do with York, England. They are a product of the Jesuits in Paris, France, of all places. And it is this nexus between the Jesuits and the Freemasons that is behind just about every conspiracy ever invented, whether it be the Kennedy assassination, whether it be 9/11, the Lincoln assassination, the Illuminati. This nexus between the Freemasons and the Jesuits is the crux of all conspiracy theory basically ever invented.
That's not confusing at all.
No. Wow.
Wow.
God, I was having, all these things just going through my head. So that pretty much, the Jesuits are associated, that goes back to times of the Rosicrucians, and Lord only knows there's a lot that surrounds the Rosicrucians as well. But I mean, the Jesuits go back, like they had a hand in everything. So it would stand to make sense that they would get into Freemasonry as well.
Well, this is the $1 million question, and this is what people miss out. This is one of the things that is always attacked by this. Is they say, "Oh, why did the Jesuits want anything to do with this? Why did the why?" But they don't. What it has to do with the Counter Reformation. You have to go back to Martin Luther, and when Martin Luther did the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, this was countered by the Society of Jesus. They were put in charge of something known as the Counter Reformation. And this is what a lot of people aren't aware of. And it's under the umbrella of the Counter Reformation that the Jesuits were given license to destroy Western civilization. They were given marching orders to have every Protestant monarch, on a gibbet. I mean, to have them hanged. And it's through the Counter Reformation that we get the Great Fire of London of 1666. We get Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot. We get, what's Freemasonry? Well, it's this inherently Protestant mystical brotherhood that's created in 1717 to turn back the Counter Reformation. So what do the Jesuits do? Well, they come at it with their own Freemasonry. So when you look at it in the context of the Counter Reformation, it makes total sense. But if you subtract that out, people wrestle with it. But when it's viewed in the backdrop of the Jesuits leading the Counter Reformation, that's where this all starts to make sense.
We will have a question here. I'll put it up, Amelia, if you can grab that, please.
Yeah, if I freeze, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Hey, Kat.
Hi, Kat. Kat asks, how different are the Freemasons of today compared to back then, if any?
What was it? How are they? What was
How
it?
different? How different are the Freemasons today compared to the ones back then, if there is any difference?
Well, I would answer it this way. It's still back in the day in the United States. I mean, it ran the show. That has inherently been kind of destroyed after the William Morgan affair. It's still, well, I'll put it to you like this: it's still around. I mean, the rituals are still the same. A lot of the esoteric side of it has been swept under the carpet. Kind of as sort of an embarrassment because of the William Morgan affair. It had to distance itself from sort of the Hermetic tradition. This was revived, I would say, at the turn of the millennium with the advent of the internet, where where the esoteric occult side of Freemasonry started to become popular. I should point out to you also, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the last show, and I'll just throw this in. I'm going to continue on with the question, but the Royal Arch ceremonial, if this sounds familiar to you, it probably should, because the whole idea of the recovery of this treasure in a subterranean vault that was concealed by the Templars. And I should point that out, in the ritual, on the original ritual, the creators of the temple vault, of the treasure vault, are the Templars. It's later changed to Jewish construction workers, but the original people are Knights Templar.
Right.
But if this story sounds familiar to you, of the recovery of this treasure in a subterranean treasure vault, it should. It's the National Treasure movie.
Yes.
The first National Treasure movie is The Ritual. Literally, it is quite honestly The Ritual.
I have to go back and watch that now, because I know there'll be details I'll recognize.
That is the Masonic Ritual. But I would say that Masonry then started in the 2000s, and when the Royal Arch of Enoch book was put out, it was kind of Freemason was kind of going through a renaissance. It's kind of now 5 or 6 years later, starting at around 16, 17, 18, it's kind of turned back a little bit, where again it's been politicized, and both sides of the extreme political aisle. I'm not going to turn this into a political show, but the hard right views it as Luciferian and conspiratorial. The hard left views it as white and privileged. So right now it's kind of like in flux. Neither extreme of the political aisle really likes it. But it's still around. I mean, and it's still there, and meetings still occur, and people are still joining. So it's there.
It seems to be a lot of people still joining. Like, I'm always interested in the Luciferian side of things, only because I know people who are, and they're all Masons. Like, they just seem to go hand in hand, and I don't discount either way. As far as like my one Luciferian friend is just he goes like, we We do believe in the good. We do believe in spirituality. We do. Like, it was the first time it was put into perspective for me anyway. Like, I didn't look at it as such a woo-hoo thing. It was just kind of like, that's actually very interesting. I like to be open-minded about things. I always say I'm a student in life. I like to hear perspectives, and I like to, to see what it's all about. But one thing I have noticed is that there are many who do lean to Freemasonry, and I think maybe it's because of some of those traditions.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's changed. It's evolved over the years. And like I
Mhm.
said, when at the turn of the millennium, like when I joined in the 90s, um, the lodges that the when I joined in the late 90s, 96, 97, I come from a long line of Maryland Freemasons. My grandfathers were Masons, my great grandfathers were Masons. It
Mhm.
skipped over my father, but that's one of the
Right.
reasons I joined. I mean, when you apply to join a lodge, there's a
Mhm.
committee set up, and it usually consists of three brothers who will interview you, and they basically want to discover a couple things. Most notably, number one is that you're not an atheist; you have to believe in a supreme being. But then
Yeah.
they'll ask you your motivation for joining, and of course, if you give the yearbook answer, you're going to be safe. Like for me, why do you want to join? Well, I want to continue on my family legacy, my family tradition for Freemasons. My grandfather was one, my great grandfather was one, my grandfathers were one, whatever. Uh,
Mhm.
and I'm interested in community work and yada yada yada. I mean, you give that answer, you're fine. I mean, if you came into them and said, "Well, I want to practice ceremonial magic and I'm going to declare
Oh
knowledge,"
boy.
I mean,
Yeah.
that
Uh,
wouldn't fly. Now it might today. I mean, now today it might. But when I
right.
joined, they would have looked at you like you just came off a UFO or something. Like, who the
Right. Right.
um, but
Right.
that was then and this is now.
Mhm.
And again, like when I joined, the people in my lodge, the elders in my lodge were a product of the old ways there's Freemasonry after the William Morgan affair. Freemasonry was, well, what is it? It's a beneficial fraternity, society that helps widows and orphans, that helps
Mm.
does charity work. Period. End of story. Any talk of Hermeticism, the occult, the operative masonry with the street plans, the astromancy of the alignment of buildings with the star system. This is all conspiracy talk. And of course, I was the newbie. I mean, I was the new guy on the block. So
Right.
I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to pick a fight. I'm not going to argue. And I didn't know any better at the time. I'm like, all right. Of
Right.
course, a few years later, you start reading, books like Manly P. Hall and Albert Pike and Albert Mackey's, and you find out this is not the case at
Mhm.
all. And you find out that a lot of the Masons aren't aware of their own history. I mean, it's like the ritual. I mean, they do the ritual, they don't know what it means. I mean, if you go up to 99 out of every 100 Masons and say, what does that third degree ritual mean? They're probably not going to know. I
Hmm.
mean, they don't have any idea that it's the retelling of the Osirian Egyptian mythology with the resurrection, with the 5 points of fellowship, which is a reference to the virgin goddess Isis.
Hmm.
And it's a retelling of the Egyptian. You're not going to get that from them because they don't know. And the reason they don't know, it's not that they're being mean spirited or anything. It's just they've never read the literature on it, and most Freemasons don't.
But you think it would be a prerequisite to at least know what you're doing?
Right. If you read the books by like Albert Pike, I mean, the first thing he says is, he says most Masons don't have any idea of what they're doing. He said when a Mason goes through the lodge, he said the symbols that are put there, and I mean, I'm always quoting him verbatim. He says the symbols that are put there and the mythologies that's told him is wrong, but it's designed to make him believe something that's not true. It's basically, he said, we still conceal secrets. It's a secret within a secret. He
Wow.
said,
Right.
and it operates like that. If you sit down and read the literature and you start looking at it in comparative religion and things like that, yeah, you can decode it. But most Freemasons don't do that. I did, but most don't.
Right. Right. That's so fascinating to me. I know that I own a collection that comes from an Oddfellows lodge, and what I found interesting about that is they also, I mean, I'm sure they all do. I'm not, I'm not in, any of these, but not, I also thought about maybe joining the women's sect of all of this. But I found it interesting because they did a lot too with their costuming and the Ark of the Covenant. Like, it's a whole other thing. And I was able to have, some of their books and that things that were recited throughout some of the ceremonies as they closed that lodge. And I feel very honored to have it, just because of the fact that it's just not something everyone sees. But there are similarities just in listening to you and some of this stuff that I've got.
Oh, sure. I mean, whenever you're dealing with these other like secret orders, whether it be the Odd Fellows or the Knights of Pythias, I mean, yeah,
Sure.
I mean, their rituals always, come back to Freemasonry in some form or
It
fashion.
does, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
same with college fraternities and sororities.
Sure.
The
Skull and Bones, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
The Odd Fellows were founded. The Grand Lodge was founded in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yes.
Yeah, and the guy was Thomas Wildey, and
Right.
they work. They also have a Royal Arch ceremonial. I believe they call it the Royal Arch of Titus, but I'd have to check. I'd have to look that up.
That sounds pretty familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, I just want to stress, because I
Mhm.
don't want to come off like I'm looking too hardcore. The the most, I mean, it's not like a knock on the Masons. They're not bad people or anything. It's
Mhm.
just that, you know, most Masons don't do this investigative research, and
Right.
they go through the lectures, they go through the rituals, and that's it. If you really take the time and sit down and read the Mackeys, the Pikes, the Manly
Mm.
Halls of the world, that's where the
Yeah.
stuff will be, kind of start being decoded for you.
Right.
But yeah, when you're dealing with groups like Odd Fellows and certainly like
Mhm.
the college and for sororities and
Just
stuff,
different versions of
yeah, I mean, yeah, you'll find,
spin-offs.
yeah,
They're
you'll find
posers, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
you'll find
Right.
you'll find the decided overlaps. Skull
Yeah.
and Bones is an interesting one because that is actually was you can argue was created as a reaction to anti-masonry
Hmm.
with Skull and Bones. That's
Right.
yeah, they're very interesting to say the
They're
least.
interesting,
They're
all
a
right.
different society, right? Like, just very different.
From what I can tell, and I mean this is just from me the research that I've done on this. I mean this isn't me talking as a conspiracy theory. They
Right.
definitely seem to be some sort of inheritor of the Illuminati of Bavaria, the original group. I mean
Hmm.
that's where this is coming from, Germany.
Right.
The guy who founded it, William Huntington Russell, along with Alfonso Taft. Huntington Russell's charter came from Germany,
Hmm.
and from what it looks like, and again, if you read the literature on this, I mean, they all say
Mhm.
the same thing that he went over there when he was a student and he kind of fell in with the remnants of this secret order that had been underground for years. Well, who does this sound like? And they
Hmm.
basically gave him permission to set this up. And essentially, Skull and Bones Order 322 is essentially the Illuminati reborn, as it were. And that's
Hmm.
what it looks like to me. And again, that's not me speaking as a conspiracy theorist. If you read all the mainstream literature on this, um, that's what it looks like.
It's interesting considering who's come out of Skull and Bones.
A lot of
Daring way into
presidents.
politics again.
Yeah, a lot of
Oh yeah,
presidents come out of there.
yeah. You got
Yeah.
the presidents, and I believe they're
The
supposed to
Bushes.
have, the what is it? The skulls of Pancho Villa, Martin Van Buren, and there's someone else. Oh, Geronimo. They're supposed to have the skulls in there, but yeah, I mean it's
Crazy.
I mean, it's definitely the order of death. There's the rituals are supposed to be very macabre. It's a little different than your college fraternity because your average college fraternity, like the one that I joined, you could join after. I think you could join after your at Gettysburg, I think you could join after your first semester of your freshman year. You could be a brother. You could join a fraternity house in your second semester as a freshman, but you couldn't live in the house until your sophomore year. But you could join in your freshman year.
Hmm.
Skull and Bones, you can only join in your senior year, and that's
Hmm.
it. You can only be a member of Skull and Bones for 1 year, and that's the senior year. And yeah, I mean, a hell of a lot of people have come out of there who have been highly influential. I mean, the Skull and Bones founded the CIA.
I was just going to
Right. I
say,
mean,
did the Skull and Bones
Bush Senior.
did they
Thank
have
you. I
anything to
believe.
do with
Bush.
Chappaquiddick?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand the whole take them in their senior year because they really do have direction and they know which way they're going in life at that point
Mhm.
and what their future could look like. And they obviously need the assistance of the secret society to bring that through. But as for the actual skulls that are there, I mean, who could say that they are or they're not? No one really.
Well, yeah, I mean, unless you're the person who dug them up. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I mean,
And even then,
the story is that that the skull, I believe, of Geronimo was excavated, was dug up, was grave robbed. I mean, that's the right word for it, by Prescott
Yeah,
Bush,
I
who
read
was
that.
who was George 41's father.
Right.
And 41, I mean, they all get nicknames in
Mhm.
Skull and Bones, and Bush 41's nickname was Magog, who was, of course, one of Satan's minions at the Book of Revelation. That's always a
Right.
fun one.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, it's a very bleak, dark organization. And then, like I
yeah,
said, you don't have to read books by conspiracy people. I mean, I have a couple books here on Skull and Bones written by mainstream authors, and they all kind of reach the conclusion that this is, that this is definitely some sort of continuation of the old Bavarian Illuminati of Weishaupt. Weishaupt's Illuminati operated on a college campus, the
Hmm.
University of Ingolstadt. So
Mhm.
for it to turn up at Yale again should really come as no surprise.
No surprise. Yeah, I mean it's pretty diverse. It's pretty big now. I mean, you have some pretty powerful people that have come out of there. But if it spins off the original, is the original still highly active? And I mean, is this where a lot of, and again, I don't want to be conspiracy, but I'm going to be conspiracy. um, is this where a lot of these powerful figureheads may be originating from in that area? Because there's a lot in that area.
Yeah, I mean the original Illuminati of Weishaupt is pretty. Well, I mean, I think most people agree it was probably defunct, or at least underground at some point in time. But you
Right.
could see a lot of parallels between the two organizations. It has to do with the way they measure time, also.
Right.
The 322. I'd have to go look this up, but it has to do with the three has to do with a decade, and there's like 222 and 122, and you
Mm.
can and in the Skull and Bones literature, it goes back to like year one is like 1876, and that's like the year that the Illuminati was suppressed. So
Mm.
it syncs with the with the unofficial end of the Illuminati. The Skull and Bones people all get nicknames. The Illuminati guys all had nicknames. I mean,
hmm
Mhm.
Weishaupt was what Spartacus, and Carnegie was Philo, and Xavier Swack. I can't remember what his was, but they all had nicknames. All the Skull and Bones people. And again, I mean, I have books here on Skull and Bones, two or three of them, not
Mm.
written by conspiracy authors, but written by mainstream historians
Mm.
who all kind of shrugged their shoulders at this. It's like
Right.
very much like Frances Yates, was this very famous female historian who came to the conclusion, we're talking about William Shakespeare. She said, look, I hate to be the one to break this to everybody, but there's when you look at this objectively, I mean, it's clear as crystal that Shakespeare is Sir Francis Bacon, and Bacon getting hit. You think there's no other way to look at it.
Right.
And that's what these mainstream historians say with Skull and Bones is like, look, I'm not trying to put on a tinfoil hat, but this thing has to come from the old Bavarian Illuminati. So that's at
Right.
least that at least seems to be the case.
So, what would have been the association with everybody going to the Hellfire Caves? Benjamin Franklin being one of them. Was that another one of these sort of? Was that free? Because he was also Freemason, which is why I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean that's again one of these secret societies, secret orders. There's a lot of them. I mean, I wouldn't really call it a Masonic order. Franklin went to it. I mean, Franklin probably went to it more acting as a spy, if anything else,
Right.
when he was in England. This was Sir Francis Dashwood, of course, was the founder of it. There's another one also that I think predated Dashwood, but I think Dashwood's kind of was based on that one. I'd have to go look. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
it was just an order that kind of was very debauched and things like that. I mean, it's not really tied to Freemasonry, and I should point this out also that Skull and Bones is not a Masonic order.
Right.
I mean, it's Masonic-like, but it has no direct affiliation with
no,
Freemasonry.
I think
Well,
it's.
I had to ask because so many of these people become, Freemasons.
I think it's something completely different than what it
Oh, for
seems,
sure.
and it's
Yeah.
not. And I don't think it's that far off from the Hollywood film.
The you do have overlap. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
prohibition in Freemasonry from joining other fraternal orders. You know, if you're a Freemason, I mean, I could certainly join the Odd Fellows. You know, the Knights of Pythias is another one, although they're not as popular as they once were. But like you had William Howard Taft, the president, who was a Skull and Bones, and then he was also a Freemason.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to make mention.
Yeah, so you can do both. I just ended on this. In Freemasonry, there is a prohibition against joining what is known as clandestine Masonry. So you can join other fraternal orders like Odd Fellows because they don't hold themselves as Freemasons. But what you can't do is join orders that hold themselves out as Masonic but actually aren't. And in the United States, these are usually lodges that revolve around women being able to join.
Right.
But in Masonry, they call these things clandestine lodges. So the rule of law is you can't join those. You can't have anything to do with those. But at any rate, that's all.
Why are women not permitted?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well,
there were women Templars. Come on.
There's two reasons. I'll give you both. There's the exoteric and the esoteric. The exoteric is it's just part of the rules that women can't join. You know, it's just been that way since time immemorial. The esoteric reason is Freemasonry is based on the entire operation of the lodge, and all Masonry and its symbols are based on the sun. And of course, the sun, since time immemorial, is the symbol of the masculine. Of course, the symbol of the feminine is, of course, the moon. So Masonry is a solar brotherhood. It's based on the sun solely. Everything in the lodge and its symbols operate based on the sun. So because of that, because it's solar related, and that's why it's all male.
Makes total sense. And it's ancient, so I understand that and I respect that.
Okay, before we lose, I did have a question in here. I need to go back and find it. We may have talked a bit about that, but here we go. Then we can continue on. There you go, Amelia.
Oh, Chris. Hi, Chris. Asks, are Masons and Rosicrucians the same thing? If not, how do they differ?
Hardcore.
Right. The Rosicrucian, from a historical standpoint, is something very difficult to pin down. We don't even know if they existed from a historical standpoint. The mainstream literature on this, and I have no reason to go against it, is that Rosicrucianism should be considered more of a mindset than an actual organization. There's no evidence that these people existed. There's none.
Wow.
There's one person, maybe two or three, who you could identify as straight Rosicrucians. The guy who wrote the Alchemical Wenig of Christian Rosenkreuz, I think his name was Johann Valentin Andre. I'd have to go look that up. It's something like that. He's as close as you can get. Many big names in history go out looking for the Rosicrucians. There's in the early 1600s, you have the Rosicrucian manifestos turning up, the Confessio, the Fama, and the Alchemical Wedding. And you know, people like Rene Descartes, Robert Flood, all go out looking for the Rosicrucians, but no one can ever find them. They don't seem to exist. But it is a philosophy. If you read the Rosicrucian manifestos, they call for universal reform. They call for ages of enlightenment, things like that. They're very democratic, universal brotherhood themes. They have very alchemical themes, and it's more of what I would call mystical alchemy, more of turning ignorance into wisdom than base metal into gold. Of course, it's all very occult. It's all steeped in the occult and mysticism and Gnosticism and all that stuff. But as an actual organization, they really don't seem to exist. No one can find them.
Crazy.
But I would say this. I would just end it on this: is there is a decided Rosicrucian, quote unquote, me using air quotes here, influence upon Freemasonry. Sort of this notion again of a mystical Protestant brotherhood, which you can clearly trace back to the Rosicrucians. I will say two last things: is the two big influencers of the Rosicrucian manifestos are two men, John Dee in England and then Giordano Bruno. Those two men are probably the biggest influences on the Rosicrucian manifestos. Both of them call for universal reform, universal enlightenment, things like that. So you can look at it like that. But then D isn't really, and Bruno, you can't hold them out as Rosicrucians. That's kind of like the catch-22 with this. And I'll just end it at this: is if you want to bring this up into modern times. If you look at the things like the recently destroyed Georgia Guidestones, R.C. Christian, that is a clear allusion to the Rosicrucians. And why would the guy behind the Georgia Guidestones masquerade using the Rosicrucian title? The answer is it's because the Rosicrucians were all about this new universal age of reform, and of course that's what the Georgia Guidestones were all about. The environmental sort of Stonehenge Holy Grail site for the environmentalist movement.
Right.
So you can see a parallel between the two, between the thought of the Rosicrucians and sort of the thought behind the Georgia Guidestones.
I didn't know that.
Recently destroyed, I might add.
Right.
Yeah.
So people panicked, so I got a lot of questions about that, but we'll go to this question instead, which is a more generic question, but you're the guy to ask. From Roger.
Oh, Roger. Hi, Roger.
Yes.
Roger says, hello, everyone. I have a question. When my brother died, his body was discovered 2 weeks later. Sorry for your loss, Roger. And someone stole his Mason ring from his decomposed body. Would the Masons replace it?
Probably not.
I was going to go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Masonic jewelry is all privately owned. That's not property of the Freemasons. That's property of the individual Mason.
Yeah.
So that would be just something that was stolen. And no, the Masonic Lodge would not replace that.
And you
Almost
see it
like a
all
high school
over.
ring.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. Like people are buying Masonic jewelry pretty regularly, unfortunately.
There are my 2 rings.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so Chris's comment.
Chris said maybe the Rosicrucians are more secret than the Masons since you can't find them.
Yeah.
That's one argument, but
Yeah.
I mean, you reach a point where if they're that secret, what's the point of it?
Right.
And I mean, there's all sorts of theories behind them. I mean, some people argue, and it's very plausible that again the Rosicrucians are the Jesuits. That this is again one of these.
I've read that.
One of these Jesuit ruses.
Yeah.
That's very possible, but again, no, you can kind of sort of link people to them circuitously, like Francis Bacon. The guys in the New Atlantis are the Rosicrucians. Say, oh well, that means Bacon was one. Not really. Sort of, maybe, kind of. But when you read the person I would point people to is, if you're interested in the Rosicrucians, there's a book. I mean, and it is the cornerstone book on them. If you haven't read it and you want to read a book on the Rosicrucians, like I said, it is the keystone book on the Rosicrucians, and it is called, appropriately enough, The Rosicrucian or The Rosicrucian Enlightenment by Francis Yates. That is the book I would point any. I've read it. I have it here. I refer to it, and that's the book that kind of, if you're interested in the historical aspect, not talking about like the symbolism or anything like that, or more of the occult side of it, but if you're just looking at the Rosicrucians from a historical point of view as a historical movement, take a look at Francis Yates' book.
Oh, there you go, Chris.
Try
the book.
So let's talk a little bit about Masonic, symbolism or rituals in films. The Exorcist is the one that interests me the most. Where that was that ritualistic? Like, what part of that was?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot going in The Exorcist, but I wouldn't call it Masonic in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
I mean, I would call that more Neoplatonic than I would Masonic.
Okay.
I can talk. I mean, I can certainly delve into The Exorcist if you want. I have no problem with it. I mean, because there's a ton going on inside that movie.
So remaking it, Robert.
I know. I saw that. Who was remaking it? It was God, I can't remember. Oh, it was the guy who did the Halloween movies. It was James
Oh,
Green,
oh,
I believe.
crazy.
Yeah, so I'll give it a chance. I mean, they did the one they did a few years ago, which I actually didn't mind. I'm when it comes to these horror remakes, I mean, it's literally, in my opinion, hit or miss. I mean, they are either really good or they really stink.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
Amityville was
I mean,
better the second time around.
I can give you, I mean, the one that is unwatchable, that is just absolute terrible, it's just atrociously bad, it was in the late 90s. They did the remake of Psycho, which is just absolutely terrible.
Right.
But then a few years ago, they did the one, I can't remember the name of the director, but I thought it was pretty good. All things being equal, I mean, I liked it, was they did the remake of Suspiria. And I like the original very much, but I like the remake. I thought the remake was admirable. I thought there was a lot going on, and I analyzed it in one of my books. It was CS3, I think. But I liked the Suspiria remake. I thought that was very well done. So again, it's hit or miss with these things. I did see that they were remaking The Exorcist, and I'll give it a chance. I mean, I'll always keep an open mind with it. We'll see, but no, the original one, the William Friedkin movie. Yeah, I mean well, I mean, there's all kind of stuff. I mean, there's a psychological mind mind bender with this thing, with the CIA, and then there's the symbolism in the movie. I mean, I don't know if you want me to talk about that, but I can.
Sure. Why not? Stage is yours.
Yeah, well, the whole thing with The Exorcist is it was a whole experiment with CIA mind control. That the whole underlying premise. Blatty worked for the CIA. I should point that out.
Right.
And the whole thing with The Exorcist, the whole thing, the subliminal sort of under the I don't know what the undertone with The Exorcist is that the demon represents the radicalism of the 1960s, and the two priests represent the authority of the state. So the whole subconscious thing going on with The Exorcist, it was that the movie is a psychological mind trick to convince the people erase the radicalism of the 1960s, where the demon is cast out by the state, the Jesuits. So it was basically an ending of the hippie movement, the sort of anti-war movement of the 1960s. That the whole premise of The Exorcist was a psychological mind trick to erase the 1960s and sort of welcome in this new age of 70s decadence, the disco era, things like that. And The Exorcist is sort of the CI bridge in between these two eras.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a mind control device, sort of. I hate to use that word mind control, but sort of maybe mind manipulation to erase the radicalism of the 60s, represented by the demon, who is of course cast out by the state, represented by the Jesuits. That's the underlying sort of psychological theme with it. But no, I mean, you can get into all sorts of Neoplatonic themes with that movie. And what I mean by Neoplatonic is sort of pagan themes that are being veiled as Christian. I mean, for example, we have the opening of the movie in the hot desert with the sun. And of course, if you're familiar with Neoplatonism, Jesus Christ is, of course, the sun, personification of the sun, Apollo, the sun god. So we have it opening in the heat of the sun, Jesus. But then as the movie wears on, of course, we get the introduction of Halloween through the trick-or-treaters. This is, of course, the death of the sun, when the days start getting shorter. And of course, what happens when the days start getting shorter? Darkness reigns. And of course, this is when the demons come out. And of course, by the end of it, it's freezing cold. And of course, this is all subconscious, that the sun, Christ's power, is diminished. Hence, the demons can come out. Stanley Kubrick uses this exact same gimmick in The Shining 7 years later, where the Torrance family arrives at the hotel on Halloween. And again, it's subconscious that this is the death of the sun. The sun is getting weaker. The daylight is decreasing. Hence, the darkness is increasing in length. Hence, the ghosts can come out.
That was a great film.
Right.
Yeah. What about The Omen? Do you think?
The Omen is the exact same themes, especially the second and the third one. I get that into a minute. Get to those in a second. But with The Exorcist, you have that going on, and I'll go to them in a second. But let me just wrap up on this. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. I got
could
ahead of myself. Sorry, Robert.
I could do a whole 4 hours on The Exorcist.
I could listen to
Go.
you for 4 hours on The Exorcist.
But
Yeah.
I'll just wrap up on this.
Yes.
With The Exorcist, Charis is the Christ figure. And if you pay attention, he's the savior of the little girl. So he's sort of the Christ analog. If you pay attention to the movie, he's always in ascent. He's always moving upwards. He's always moving up a flight of steps or moving up a hill or something. You always see him pretty much in the movie, always moving upwards. And when he's introduced into the movie, he's walking up from a subway onto a subway platform, coming up a flight of steps. Pay very attention to the background. He's coming up from 33rd Street, which is, of course, a direct reference to Jesus, his 33 years on earth, crucifixion at 33. And, of course, Charis winds up dead at the end of the movie also. So keep an eye out for that. The Omen movies, especially the second and the third one, do the exact same. It's the exact same trick. You'll find there's a lot with these movies with the devil and God, where when it's winter, the devil comes out, and when it's summer, the horror movies with the devil are never set in the summertime, because that's when the sun is out. They always take place in winter or autumn or something.
Never
like that.
paid attention to that. That is so true.
That's all psychological. If you watch, take a look at, this is a good one. If you watch the Omen movie, watch the second and the third one, the Damien Omen 2, and then the Final Conflict.
Politics.
Pay attention to Damien Omen 2. That entire movie, this is where the Antichrist is becoming a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Though that entire movie is flip-flops between autumn and winter. That's all it is autumn and winter. There's no spring, there's no spring, and there's no summer. Why? Because that's when Jesus comes out to play. When the Antichrist, that's when the sun comes out. When the Antichrist is gaining power, it has to be dark, so it has to be autumn and winter. When the Omen 3 rolls around, what happens? Darkness is decreasing. Jesus is coming back, the resurrection of the sun at the vernal equinox. When do you think Damien Omen 3 or whatever was Omen 3 was released? It was released on the vernal equinox 1981.
Right.
As above, so below. It's the movie is
timing.
Yeah, it's symbolizing the death of the darkness, the Antichrist, hence Jesus is coming back.
So it's all astrology.
A lot of it is. Oh, absolutely.
Yes. They hide behind cinematography with that. The remake of The Omen is really, really, really good.
I've seen it, but it's been years.
It's really good. Really good. If anyone's looking into seeing it, they did it justice. They didn't go too far, which I think with The Exorcist, they're going to kill it with CGIs.
Yeah, probably. But I have, I'll give it a shot.
I thought it was really well done. They didn't go too far. And I think it was done long enough before the crazy CGI movement that, the respect is still there for the story and the cinematography.
I like the David Gordon Green Halloween movies. The last 3 trilogy, the trilogy that he just made, because they have all kind of stuff going on in them. So I'll give it a shot. I'm not gonna of course judge it until I see it. I know Hollywood right now is into remaking everything. I wish they kind of wouldn't do it, but
go for the sure thing, right?
I sort of understand, and like I said, it's hit or miss with these guys. I mean, the Psycho movie that they did in the late 90s was god awful, but I did like Suspiria, so we'll see.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by The Omen. I thought they were going to mess that up, and I was pleasantly surprised that they kept the original story intact. I really was.
That's always sort of the fine line you have to walk with these horror remakes. Is you get into a movie like Psycho, and it's just like a frame by frame remake, and it's like, why bother? But then it's like a double edged sword. But then if you're going to change it around, then people will beat up and say, oh well, you changed it around, it's not the same movie. So you kind of have to walk this fine line of keeping it, sort of honest, keeping it in tune with the original, but you want to tweak it maybe a little bit, where it's somewhat different. And I thought they did that good. I thought that was well done with Suspiria. The Omen movie that came out, I think, in 2006, I've seen it. I have it actually here on Blu-ray because I have the Omen box set, but it's been years since I watched it. But I'll take another look at it.
Let me know. I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Steve says Dario's masterpiece. So have you heard of that? I'm not familiar with that one.
that's Suspiria is what he's talking about. And
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, got it.
this will tie in what we talked about earlier, and
Right.
pay attention to when you're watching that. The next time you're watching Suspiria, this is the Dario Argento one from I think 76, 77.
I've never seen it.
Oh no, when you watch it, you got to pay real close attention to this. That movie is set in Heidelberg, and that's where Heidelberg Castle was. That's where the Bohemian Winter King and Queen lived. And if you read the Rosicrucian manifestos, they were the bulkheads of the Rosicrucians. If you watch the original Suspiria movie, when Susie sneaks into the witch's coven, you'll find well, I'll go back a little bit. You'll find a plaque on the wall of a guy named, I think it's Dionysius Erasmus, who was a free thinker and who's been linked to the Rosicrucians. When Susie's in the witches' chambers, and when she's sneaking back, you'll see on the walls all the Rosicrucian symbols, and the implication is Heidelberg was one of the hangouts of the Rosicrucians. The implication is, and they never say it. It's just you just got to put it together. Is that the witches kind of basically threw the Rosicrucians out and took over their lodge rooms. So when you're watching that, keep an eye on when Susie's going back into the witches' coven. All the stuff on the walls is all the Rosicrucian symbols, and the implication is the witches basically tossed out the Rosicrucians and took over their hideout, essentially.
Wow, never seen that. What about Dorian Gray? Anything?
Oscar Wilde, I haven't seen the movie in years. I'm not going to comment on it, but you know, I mean, I was reading about the whole thing that Aleister Crowley did at Oscar Wilde's grave. That's kind of always a fun little story.
That's a great story. Anything with Aleister Crowley is interesting because he was, I think, misunderstood in some ways, but way out there. Clearly.
Well, one of the things that I'm doing right now, and I probably don't have time to get into it, but
it's up to you.
Well, it's a long story and it's time constrained. But one of the things that's very unique about Crowley is he seems to have been onto something here with this whole. I mean, I believe this with the age of Horus, the Aeon of Horus, and the age of Aquarius. What makes this particularly strange, though, is if you read between the lines with Crowley and you read his books on gematria, he identifies certain numbers. And he gets into, like, you know, the Goat of Mendes number and what this number means and what this number means. And what makes this so peculiar is these numbers blanket 9/11. I mean, they're all over the place. And I can't quite put it together. But then what makes it even more, I've come to the conclusion that these numbers are some sort of heralding this new age. And what makes this even more bizarre is if you look at the JFK assassination, Crowley's fingerprints are all over that too. With his numbers, and it's almost inconceivable to think that a human hand was behind this. But it is very strange, to say the least.
I hear he's brilliant. I mean, he definitely, I feel, was misunderstood with respects to, like, his mind just worked so fast and so differently. I think he had a lot of, well, I'll say premonitions, but I also think that he had extraterrestrial contact. I mean, he drew photos, he drew sketches and images of this being. I wonder how much was actually given to him with respects to maybe what was coming. You know, he lived in fascinating areas. I mean, when Mussolini's terrified of you, you know, and you're Mussolini was just a big
Mussolini
a-hole.
was a Roman Catholic. That's
I know, but you know,
he was afraid. They're afraid of all darkness, right?
Oh yeah, like just very fascinating individual.
Yeah. I mean, it is. He's definitely a strange character, to say the least. But he seems to. The whole thing with the Aeon of Horus runs parallel with the Age of Aquarius, as far as I'm concerned. They're the same thing. They can be interchanged, But what makes it so peculiar is these numbers that he points out, and how they just. It's very, very hard to explain. I mean, obviously Crowley is long dead.
Yes.
But you get the impression, at least I do, that him and Awas are sort of pulling the strings from behind the scene in the afterlife, sort of using these world events as heralds of the end of Pisces and the start of Aquarius. That's the way I'm reading this right now.
Well, the church did it too. I mean, look when they even, you know, how long through history, let's just take the Egyptians. We head into the age of Taurus, the bull worshiping, all of that. And you get into, when you're coming in, let's just say, okay, let's go with Pisces. I mean, look at the church. You just look at the caps that they wear. It looks like the head of a fish.
Right, the Dagon, the fish god.
Right. So then you're coming into the age again of Aquarius. Like we're getting to another age. Things are starting to change and shift. Even with ideology, everything is changing.
Do you know what? If you read Aleister Crowley's book 4, Magic and Theory of Practice, and he says this point blank, and he doesn't use this word, but I'm going to tell you, know what and this is just, I was on another show actually 2 nights ago talking about this same thing. When Crowley is talking about the age of Horus and the age of Aquarius, do you know what Crowley says the new religion is? I'm not asking as a trick question.
No.
You can read it point blank.
Mm-hmm.
He said transgenderism.
Sure.
He said that is the new religion of the Aquarian age. And this was something he wrote 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Here it is happening. And I was on with another show the other night, and I said, as this Aquarian age sort of is coming into being right now, I said I see 3 new religions popping up.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and one of them has to do with the old age of Pisces. And again, I'm not going to turn this into a political thing here because I really don't like to do that. But right now, you the way I see it is you have 3 religions coming on board. You have the whole transgenderism thing.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the climate change thing, which
Mm-hmm.
both of those have all the hallmarks of a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the third one, believe it or not, which is the whole thing with Donald Trump, where you have clearly Trump as a Christ figure of some kind.
To some people, for sure.
Yeah, whether it has nothing to do with whether you like him or not, but you have those 3 sort of
he's a movement.
Subcults like being generated right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely believe that these 3 things are sort of growing out of the old age of Pisces ending and this new age of Aquarius starting. I was talking to a friend of mine in England, and we both came to the same conclusion that Aquarius is well underway at this point in time.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I don't. You hear people talk about Pisces and ending, and no. We're out of the cusp phase of Pisces Aquarius. We are into the age of Aquarius at this point in time.
Astrologically speaking, especially, we are. But I think it's just seeing it. People, as humans, we need visuals to be able, we have to see something to believe it. But you say that, and you say, well, the God figure, God. Well, you don't see God, but you believe God. You feel it. You know it. Like to the faithful, they know it. So, but every time something like this comes up in your theory, people need to see it. I think when you talk about cinematography, you're looking at visuals. It's like the people behind all of this know how to reach the masses. And we had somebody making mention, I think it was Chris, saying, we need to bring Robert back to talk about movies. Okay, you need to go back to April the 20th when Robert was on the show. We talked about movies.
Exactly.
So, we love you, Chris. But it's there for sure.
Well, like one of the things that was really unique is, and this is something else that I'm looking into, and I'm almost tempted to write a book on this itself, is the tarot imagery around 9/11, and the two that are the most obvious is the Tower card, of course, and then the Hanged Man, which is the guy falling out of the building, the falling man photo.
Right.
It is amazing to me. Those are the 2 most obvious ones. There's some other ones too, but those are the 2 most obvious ones. I went to Aleister Crowley's book of Thoth, and if people don't know, Crowley created his own pseudo-Egyptian tarot cards. I have a deck right here from the 1960s. He wrote a book called The Book of Thoth, and it is his interpretation of those cards. And he says point blank, and it is just, I read this the other day, and it was just astounding to me. He says, if you see essentially the Tower come to life and the Hanged Man come to life, he said that means one thing only: Pisces has ended and Aquarius has started.
Oh, wow.
And you see both of those on 9/11. And when you start looking at the numbers of 9/11, for example, I'd have to pull this up, and I don't have it in front of me. If you look at, and this is true because I've run this about 5 times now. I wouldn't say this idly. When it comes to gematria, if you run the numbers, and I mean this is just like I said, astounding on the people, the number of people on those 4 flights that day. You take them between the passengers, the crew, and the terrorists. All 4 of those planes reduce to 2 numbers, 9 and 11, all of them.
Wow.
And I could not believe it. I could not believe it. I've run that math about 10 times because I couldn't believe it. And if you take the passengers, the terrorists, and the crew on those 4 planes that went down that day, you can reduce everything to 2 numbers, 9 and 11. And I'm not making that up. I do not say that idly.
Wow.
And when you start factoring that in with the Tarot imagery and some of the other numbers popping up, I mean, like for example, I mean, this is when I was talking to again a show the other night, and I think I couldn't believe it. I mean, and it's hard for me to say this because I still had trouble believing it. But when you look at like the numbers, like for example, Flight 77, this is the one that hit the Pentagon. Flight 77 struck the Pentagon. The Pentagon sits on the 77th meridian and is 77 feet tall. And the aircraft that was guarding the Pentagon that day was Venus 77, and the symbol for Venus is a 7-pointed star. So that's 10 sevens right off the bat.
Right.
I mean, and it's just, you know, you can't make that stuff up. And like when I see something like that, for someone who has done this for 30 years, one way or another, the person asked me, he said, well, how do you account for it? The only thing I can tell you is, I mean, this is something like supernatural going on. I don't think a human hand is behind this. And here's the other thing that makes this even 10 times more creepy is you see the same thing with the Kennedy assassination. What's the number 77? If you look at Crowley, it's the goat of Mendes. It's the god of the new age. He says, when you start seeing 77, Baphomet is here. If you look at the Kennedy assassination, what was Kennedy's license plates? GG 77. Where was he driving to? The Stemmons Freeway. What's that? Route 77. Where does that lead to? Waco, Texas. What happened there in 1993? The Waco Branch Davidian compound. How many acres did that sit on? Oh, 77. I mean, come on.
Jeez.
You know, and
wow.
And he said to me, he said, how do you account for this? I said, this is what you were witnessing with that, what I just ran off. This is a supernatural dark force at work. And what that is it's fingerprints that it can't get rid of. It's like a criminal who's trying to cover up something, but it leaves the latent thumbprint behind. Those numbers are a dark supernatural force at play in our universe. And it's evidence that it's the evidence that it's leaving behind are those numbers. And it doesn't want to leave them. But if you know to look for them, that's its fingerprint.
Which is interesting to me because the Catholics will tell you that 777 specifically is a number of God.
Well,
I mean, holy crud.
If the number 7 has very numinous qualities, that's true. I mean, 7 days of creation. But if you read Crowley and you get into divination and things like that, 7 takes on a much darker meaning. And Crowley identifies 77 with the goat of Mendes, and he says 777, 3 sevens are essentially the goat of Mendes on steroids. So if you read, Crowley's numerology, look at his gematria. I mean,
I think we should do a show just on Crowley.
Look at his books and his gematria, because this stuff blankets this stuff. I'm telling you right now, and I haven't done one iota of research on this. I guarantee you that if you start looking at like Columbine or something like that, you're going to see these numbers popping up all over the place again. And what makes Columbine funny is one of the killers in that, Dylan Klebold, was actually born on September 11th, 1981. So, you have a nexus there. And Harris, his companion, actually made journal entries saying he wanted to load a plane with explosives and fly it into lower Manhattan. So go figure that one. But I'm more convinced than ever that if you start looking at these sort of catastrophic events starting in the 20th century, these Crowley numbers are going to start surrounding them. I could be wrong, but it's definitely something worth looking at.
We're going to take a quick a quick break, and we have to do our station and sponsor ID.
Let's pray I don't freeze during this. Okay, so I'll make it quick.
Okay.
You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 and 107.7 FM radio. We are streaming right now on Roku. We are live and in archive. So if you're watching us live from there or on archive, hello and welcome. Please share us with your friends. Our guest tonight is Robert W. Sullivan IV, and we are discussing his book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. If you missed it, don't worry about it, because you can stream our archives on any platform that you normally use. And again, don't forget to share us with friends. That's going to be the common topic here. A huge thank you to the amazing people at Folgers Coffee for sponsoring our show. And we'd like to say thank you for our intro and outro to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, award-winning composer and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, and check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Now, if you're watching us live on Facebook, or if you're watching us on YouTube, live or archived, please give us a like, click subscribe, and share us.
Bam.
Okay,
there
back
we
to
go.
you.
There we go. Wow, that's something. I'd love to do a show just on the whole Crowley numerology, all of that. I think it's fascinating. And again, I guess it spins back a little bit to Freemasonry in a way, with numbers and geometry and sacred geometry, things of that nature. I don't know. Was he a Mason?
Yeah, well, Crowley was a Freemason, and he was.
Thank you.
He's more noted for his membership in the Golden Dawn, which was sort of Freemasonry, a much more mystical blend of Freemasonry. But Crowley was a Mason, and yeah, I mean, I have come to believe after looking at this stuff and really breaking it down that I mean he was definitely onto something. I mean, with all this, I mean it's not a coincidence, that all this stuff that he was talking about is coming to fruition. I'm not even fully 100% sure that he even fully understood it. He always kind of held himself out as a bit of a fraud. I don't think he was. I mean, I think he was in some aspects, but I think he did it deliberately. I mean, that's the one thing with Crowley that's just so hard to pin down with him is, you really have a difficult time of knowing when he was being serious and when he was just pulling your leg.
Right.
And he did that on purpose. I mean, that was done by him on purpose. He wanted it to be a mystery. But no, if you're interested in Crowley, I mean, by all means, take a look at some of his books. The 777 book, and the Book of the Law, and of course, I guess his seminal work is Book 4, Magic and Theory and Practice. I mean, I would, and Book of Thoth about the tarot, and you're going to really see some astounding things, and some things that seem to really be coming true in the world we live in.
Do you think, typically Nostradamus, because with his predictions, he had a lot of numbers also, with numerology, and I can't remember the exact years, if it fell into the years of when Freemasonry, more modern, when I say more modern, the 1700s, because this goes back like pretty far.
Well, it depends on, like I said, who you want to listen to.
Right.
I mean, the actual origins of Freemasonry are unknown. I mean,
Right.
it's just competing views. I mean, we know certain things about it. I mean, we obviously know there were these builders guilds and stone guilds, in medieval Europe.
But with amazing mathematical accuracy.
Well, that's just it, and this is where the Ramsey oration comes in. I mean, he says, look, you have the Knights Templar over in the Middle East. They must have come into something, because they come back to Europe, and all of a sudden these mathematically perfected cathedrals start popping up all over the place, aligned to the solstices and the equinoxes, and containing the golden ratio and all this, that, and the other. I mean, where is this all of a sudden coming from?
Mhm.
And the question kind of answers itself. It's coming from the Templars,
Mhm.
and this information that they must have come in contact with. I mean, again, this is the whole crux of the Royal
Mhm.
Arch ritual is
Well, it's
whatever.
vibration, it's frequency. I mean, they practiced with frequency.
Well, but this is the whole idea of the rituals. Whatever they had
Right.
is in this subterranean vault. I mean, I did a show on this with the whole thing with Oak Island. I mean, is this the arch? The Vault of Enoch? Is this the thing that the Templars are talking about?
Right.
Is this real history? I don't know, but I mean, there seems to be a lot to it. And what makes it even stranger is this whole ritual, this whole thing is coming out of the world of the Jesuits of all people. and
Yeah.
and, and you just these guys were really people think of the Jesuits in terms of today. Oh, this is just a bunch of drunk Catholic guys who ran my high school. I mean, but back in the 16th 17th century, I mean,
Mhm.
this was Langley was was
Yes.
was the Jesuits. I mean, these guys were the CIA, the assassins,
Mm.
the spies. The that was the Jesuit modus operandi.
Mhm.
So when you go back in time, you got to look at the Jesuits were a totally different operation than they are today.
Well, I read something not long ago with respects to even the Titanic. The captain of the Titanic was supposed to be a Jesuit, and he was told, allegedly, you know, no, this is what you're going to do. And allegedly, you cannot say no. So for
Yeah.
what you say, again, I read it, and there's somebody who goes, and this is something that he includes in his talks, when he does media and so on. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is when they say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And if there is this whole way, as I'm going to go, let me get my tinfoil hat, as you say, if there is something to it, and they are this powerful organization, they definitely have a way of altering history or putting it in the direction that they want it to go.
Yeah, the Jesuits are kind of like the Freemasons. Their power has also been curtailed
Right.
substantially. What's funny you bring up Titanic because in this new movie book I'm writing, I think I might have mentioned this last time. I think I did. Is I'm doing the whole 9/11 thing with the movies, and I kind of hesitated on this one, but I thought no, I'll put it in because of this one thing I found out was the movies that kind of predict or sort of foretell 9/11.
Hmm.
I listed Titanic from 1997 as one, and I thought to myself, well, it is a movie about this disaster that killed over 1,500 people, and of course the loss of life does run parallel with 9/11,
Mm.
and it is sort of this disaster movie that kind of is runs parallel in the same theme of 9/11, this immense tragedy that happened that day. But of course, then you get into the synchronicity of it. The director of Titanic, James Cameron, and one of the co-stars of the movie, Bill Paxton,
Mm.
recently deceased, died about 4 or 5 years ago.
Deceased, yes.
I mean, where were they on 9/11 when the planes were hitting? Up there at the wreck of the Titanic, of course, underwater. So of course
Right.
you have that synchronicity going on. So I thought
Right.
that was very
Mm.
interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I think that there's definitely people out there who can, pull some strings, that they can alter, what goes on and what happens in our world. And a lot of them do seem to belong to, I'll say secret societies. I don't look at the Freemasons as a secret society because you're very out there. You're very open about it. There's a lot of members around the world. And yes, of course, you have to be, secret about some things, but that's the way it goes. But it just is interesting to me how some very powerful people come out of your organization. Am I even saying that right? Organization? The Freemasons are,
Yeah,
would that be the right? Because I don't want to mislabel it, because I think
no,
it
it's
gets
like
mislabeled a lot.
no, it's organization, fraternity, secret
Fraternity.
society. Yeah,
Sure. Okay.
those are all fair. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's very popular. I mean, and
Hmm.
it still maintains a high level of popularity.
Hmm.
Like I said, it's probably maybe a little waning right now. Like I said, on the political extreme, it's not well liked right now. But yeah, I mean, you definitely have a lot of famous people who have joined the Masonic Lodge. I mean, not only presidents and politicians, actors, celebrities. I mean, there are some that if I rattled off their names, you probably wouldn't believe me.
No, I believe you. I some of them are very, very public about it.
Yeah, you tell some people who are famous Freemasons are like, oh, no way. Richard Pryor, for example, was a
Jay-Z.
I don't know about him.
Oh yeah, he is.
Well, he's in a boatload of trouble right now.
Yeah,
he's in a boatload of trouble right now.
He's very vocal.
Shaquille O'Neal is. I've never heard Jay-Z.
Yeah, he's pretty vocal about it.
Really, I have to look that up.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is interesting. There just seems to be an influx of it. So I'm sort of making me wonder, what do you guys know that maybe the rest of us don't? Because they're really, he talked about it when he was going, to the ceremony. He shows off this ring, but he's also very Illuminati. And this is I guess where I'm going to go next, as we slowly get into our last half hour. Is this constant connection? Is it hurting Freemasonry as a fraternity, as an organization right now, with a lot of these celebrities coming in, or these professional athletes coming in, who are, especially, I'll have to say the men because it's Freemasons, but they're also very vocal about being Illuminati, all the symbols, that you see. And they're connecting the two.
Right. I mean, the Illuminati doesn't exist. So I would say that they're probably just doing this for theatrics.
Theatrics, cabal, then?
What's that?
Cabal, then? Maybe I'm just wording it wrong.
You mean Kabbalah?
Cabal? Well, yeah. I mean, you see the cabal is what you see a lot. You just see a lot of the symbols. Everybody. You have politicians. You have celebrities. You have religious figures. Even you have athletes. This seems to be a really big thing in symbolism, and you see it out there everywhere. And I think when you say, like we're not very well liked right now, I'm just wondering if it's this constant association that isn't helping.
Well, I think it's more political. Like I said, I think it's more of a political thing. A lot of the stuff with celebrities making the eye sign.
Yes.
I mean, that's theatrics. I wouldn't look anything
right.
Other than that. That's just theatrics.
Right.
But I guess, for me, it's having been involved with it for 30 years. It's, how can I explain? It's if you really are involved with it, the symbols of Freemasonry are how can I explain this? It's much more subtle than that. I mean, for example, if you flash that thing, that would tell me you're not a Freemason, and you don't have the first clue what you're talking about. That's what it would tell me. Like, for example, something that would tell me that you're a Mason, or was kind of in tune and would be sending me a message, would be the number 47. That would tell me I'm dealing with a Mason or something like that. So it's sort of how can I say that what a lot of people I think are Masonic, I would see more as theatrics, and it's more of things that are more subtle that I would pick up on being a Mason that no one else would.
Right.
Things
so
like
you guys are just looking at this like, oh my God, who let the kids out? Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, Freemasons. I mean, to be fair about it, I'm not trying to put anyone down.
Anybody can.
For example, I mean, I'll tell a story on this. I mean, I do it. I mean, I do it to an extent. I'll get an occasional email from someone who claims to be a Mason, and they probably are, who say, "Oh, I heard you on this podcast, and you said this, that, and the other, and that's kind of unmasonic, and you should." And my response to that is, and this is why I added the word showman to my description, was, whenever I'm on these shows, I mean, if I just sit here and just read you, the kind of textbook Masonic history, you're probably gonna be bored to tears with it. And I tell people, I said, look, when I do these podcasts, and on shows with you, I mean, I must be afforded a certain level of theatrics. I mean, otherwise it's going to be, kind of dull. So I mean, I mean, I think that's what, when I see entertainers doing that and anything, it doesn't anger me or upset me.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's just them being theatrical. It's, hey, let's flash this I sign, and some people start talking in a chat room that we're in the Illuminati.
Yeah, but when I see the Pope do it, it wigs me out. Sorry.
And all that and the other.
Right.
So that's the way I would view it. So when I see people ask me all the time about Masonic stuff in movies, and I'm kind of, I mean, it's more other things. It's like Gnostic or alchemical. I mean, I guess maybe it's somewhat tied to Masonry,
Right.
but like
I think people are tying them to.
I mean, if you want to, like I said, if you want to watch and this is what it goes. I go back to when I came on the show. If you want to watch a Masonic ritual from start to finish on the big screen, it's the first National Treasure movie. I mean, that literally is the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial.
Oh, I will go back and watch it. I've seen it.
You've got everything there
Right.
from a Masonic standpoint. And I mean, it's overtly Masonic. I'm not disputing that, but there's a lot going on beneath the surface, that a lot of people didn't pick up on.
Which I guess when you're looking at the ceremony, Rosslyn Chapel, do you think there's a lot of Masonic symbolism in there? I mean, there's Templar symbolism, because there does seem to be a lot pertaining to esoteric knowledge there.
Yeah, I mean that one's kind of a mystery. Again, this is you're in the realm of speculation, because we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sinclairs were sort of the patrons in Scotland of Freemasonry. That is 100% true.
Keeper of relics, yeah.
But if you read the history book, it was more of a de facto sort of hands-off thing. It really wasn't hands-on. The thing about the guy being a Knights Templar was added years later. And you have the three pillars. Again, that was named later. All that being said, you do have a lot of occult, esoteric themes going on. I mean, there definitely seems to be.
It's an anomaly.
There definitely seems to be a nexus to the real Knights Templar. I don't think that's a stretch. But again, you're just sort of left to speculate on it.
Right.
I mean, it's okay to speculate. I mean, because there is evidence there, but I can't give you, a definitive answer. It's like asking me, well, where does Freemasonry come from? Well, I can give you 10 answers.
Well, I think if it spins off, by making mention, because I've been and I do notice a lot of similarities into, the Freemasons, and because it's just wondered if you had an opinion on it, because it's just one of those places that's a bit of an anomaly, but yet seems to have some kind of a connection.
I imagine. I mean, I'm sure. I would be positive. I've never been there, but I guarantee you that, I mean, being a product of actual operative Masonry, it's going to incorporate a lot of, the sacred measurements, the golden rule, the golden ratio. I think I even touched on this in the Royal Arch, but I'd have to go look. But no, I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there are all sorts of occult and esoteric symbols and themes going on in that church. I mean, me personally, I mean, if you told me that it's linked to the Templars, no, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Right.
I mean, can I prove that? No, but would it surprise me? No, it wouldn't.
Right. Okay. Well, I like that. So, and getting back to Robert, what is coming up for you in the next while? Because a lot of people who do the media circuit have busy summers. So, what do you have coming up?
Right. Well, right now I have I'm working on the next cinema book, Symbolism IV. That I'm working on. That's gonna have a lot of 9/11 stuff in it in the first chapter, and that's gonna have a lot of breakdown in that. I'm also working on revised editions of Royal Arch, Cinema Symbolism, and CS2. Cinema Symbolism 3 is finished. I'm not touching that. I just did a revised edition of Pact with the Devil. So I'm going to do there's some stuff I want to change around in those three other books, but that's still probably, I mean, all of it's probably at least 2 years away. I know for Cinema Symbolism 4, the one movie that I want to incorporate, and it doesn't come out till next year, is the sequel to the Joker movie, because the first Joker movie had puns going on in it. And I imagine the second one will as well. So right now I'm working on Symbolism 4. I'm working on the revised edition of the Royal Arch. I mean, they'll probably be out in the next 2 to 3 years, somewhere in that. I am strongly contemplating doing some sort of separate book on the 9/11 stuff. Just, I'm doing this first chapter in the movie book with it, but I am really considering just, doing a 9/11 book on the Tarot and Crowley and just some more of the occult themes to it, and maybe tying it into some of the other world events. But I haven't quite made up my mind on that yet. But right now, the next ones for me are Symbolism 4 and a revised edition of the Royal Arch.
Okay, I think you should write the book, because realistically, there's so much interest in it, and just some of the stuff you're mentioning tonight, it just seems like it can go on. You can tie in a lot of different things there. So I would definitely be interested in delving further into that. But thank you so much for joining us, guys. If people want to get a hold of you, your website, which is
absolutely. Well, thank you, Amelia, and thank you, Michelle, for having me on the Outer Realm tonight. It was my pleasure to be here. Yeah, I mean, my website is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is www.robertwsullivan, and then the letter I and the letter V for the fourth, robertwsullivan.iv.com. There are links there to purchase the books, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. They're available in all the either print or the ebook form. There's links there about upcoming shows I'm going to do. There's a media archive with recent radio and podcasts I've done. Information about me, a biography. It's a very easy site to navigate. www.robertwsullivan.iv.com, and again, links to purchase the books. It's all right there. And again, thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Always a
pleasure. And the website scrolling across the bottom for all of our video watchers, listeners. And we'll make sure that it is also in the show description so people can go in and just click on it and get you from there. So thank you again. And I will be in touch after the show with links and such.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night. You too. Well, we have come to the end of another fantastic segment. Just sort of went all over the place, and holy God, this man is very versed. So we were always very, very honored when any of our guests joined us. But he's a really knowledgeable fellow, and I'm glad everybody in chat enjoyed it also. And again, go back to I think I gave you guys the date on, I believe it was April 20th, if you want to see the show, where he talks about symbolism in the cinema. So it was also a really great show. So guys, big thank you to Robert Sullivan. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee and to Dr. Justin Snickers, Steve McGinnis. Thank you all. Tomorrow night, we welcome back Barbara DeLong, Reverend Barbara DeLong, and she's going to be discussing the release of her, probably of a few things, but this is a re-release of her Cosmic Deck of Initiation, which comes with a handbook. And we started touching on that the last time, and it really delves into consciousness. So we're going to start off there because that's where we ended, and we're going to delve into consciousness and keep going. She is a very versed lady, and she does tons of different events, podcasts. She writes a lot. She's a go-to person on many levels. So we're very, very honored that she's going to be joining us again. So thank you all for tuning in, and Amelia and I shall see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you and good night.